Greetings, my name's Jim, and I'm the organizer of our San Diego Breakthrough Energy Pioneers meetup group. We now have 40 members in our group as of today, or maybe it was yesterday. Someone just joined, and apart from me, 41 total, there's now 40 other members in our meetup, which is wonderful. I'm recording this on the 17th of October, 2014, and it's now been approximately 6 months, a little bit less than that, since I decided to start this meetup. And it's been at a relatively low level of activity, but I'm glad that I took the initiative to start it. And my hope is that it can be a hub, kind of a little mustard seed, acorn, initial seed of activity, interest, and relationships in San Diego for growing interest and public discussion around this topic that we often refer to as breakthrough energy or new energy. I got involved in this whole field 10 years ago, and I was living in Costa Rica at that time and working at the UN's University for Peace. And I got involved in something that was a little bit controversial. There was a shakeup in the management of the university. I ended up losing a job that I had there. And it involved high international political intrigue, a CIA program, a lot of stuff. Anyway, while I was down there involved in these very interesting activities, I was invited to the home of friends, and a gentleman came down and he was speaking about a book and about a nonprofit project he was starting to educate the public about suppressed revolutionary energy technologies. And this was Dr. Brian O'Leary, who became a good friend of mine, passed away a couple years ago. And those of you who followed the breakthrough energy movement or related projects, Dr. Stephen Greer's projects in the energy area, Foster Gamble, who's a friend of mine also in his Thrive project, and others, Joel Garvin and New Energy Movement, Joel's a friend of mine, are familiar with this term new energy or breakthrough energy. But when Brian gave this presentation in January of 2004 in the capital city of Costa Rica, where I was living at that time, he mentioned that he was starting this nonprofit project, which was New Energy Movement, which Joel and a group still continue to manage. And I immediately said, I'll volunteer for that. I was aware of the fact that Nikola Tesla had invented free energy technologies that had never made it out, and that J.P. Morgan and J.D. Rockefeller had been involved in suppressing the market entry of Nikola Tesla's technologies. I was just peripherally vaguely aware of the fact that there almost certainly were a range of promising energy and transportation technologies that had not been permitted out. And when Brian spoke of this, I immediately could see, this could really change the world. This could really change the paradigms in our world, and this trend toward shared scarcity, austerity, militarism, Orwellian tendencies, Big Brother, the NSA element, all these things. And yet I'm convinced that on our planet and in nature there's natural abundance. This was a premise of Foster Gamble and his wife Kimberly when they went into their Thrive project. It's stated very clearly in the documentary that they produced, which has now been seen by tens of millions of people, that they had the conviction that there's a natural state of harmony and abundance which we see in nature and we see in many different social settings. And yet on our mainstream media we're inundated with all this negativity, and the wars seem to just constantly have a new excuse, but when you look under the covers you find the excuses are false, are misrepresent, the real reasons are being misrepresented and so forth. So they were trying to get at what do we need to do to make a course correction for Mother Earth, our planetary host, and for humanity. And one of the big topics they came up with was the suppression of the revolutionary clean energy technologies. And actually in 2008, I was living in southern Ecuador, Vilcabamba, Ecuador, for 4.5 months. And my purpose was to spend some time near Brian O'Leary, who had become kind of a pen pal of mine, and I wanted to discuss some possibilities for developing a truth and reconciliation process in the United States around this topic of the suppression of the revolutionary breakthrough energy technologies that humanity, our world, so needs. The concept of a truth and reconciliation process generically is different than normal criminal or civil prosecution, because typically we're not talking about sentencing. There's a lot of different variations, but the concept is that individuals, in return for not being sentenced to, let's say, life in prison, serious crimes against the state, against the nation, etc., treason, other things, high crimes, RICO statutes, etc., kind of spill their guts. And it's a healing process for society and for them. And then they can say, for example, okay, I don't have to spend life in prison now. I killed this, inventor who wanted to get out this revolutionary free energy technologies. For example, the people who poisoned Stan Meyer who had this water car technology and so forth. But now, as a matter of sort of how shall we say, compensating and making things right, I will help source funding and contacts to get out these technologies on a revolutionary, or on an accelerated basis, because I realize our world needs them. We really, in our world today, I just read an article this morning, this is October 2014, on the internet, that was saying that the total U.S. debt, national debt, has gone from $9 trillion in 2007, 7 years ago, to $18 trillion today. That's a doubling in 7 years. And GDP is really a bogus statistic, because all of these false flag wars going over to Iraq for ultimately for a geopolitical control and trying to establish a permanent base in that region related to all the oil resources and the geopolitical control that represents. Afghanistan, similar story with energy resources, geopolitical chessboard game there with Russia and Europe and other things. Not what it is represented to be. We're going to go over there to bring them democracy. Come on. And it was the CIA and MI5 who put Saddam Hussein in power in the first place back in the day. The public is never told the truth about these things, and unfortunately it's very distressing to me that so many of my fellow Americans tune into such crap on the television, that it's mindless diversion, and it's sort of like the global peasantry, at least let's talk about in our own country and not the entire globe, but has been told, okay, sports programming is okay. You can go crazy about sports programming and buy the jersey of your favorite player and so forth. You can watch Dancing with the Stars and this sort of stuff, but don't tune into Jim's videos, mine, about serious topics that are handled at they're above your pay grade. Don't question the 911 story. Don't question what has going on in Iraq or what shows up in your mainstream San Diego Union Tribune, attributed to Reuters, but it's actually from the Pentagon Press Corps or whatever. These kinds of things. If you go back to the founding of our country, it was the principle of a government of, by, and for the people. That's not a phrase from the Constitution, but that was the concept. It was an honest, open, ethical government, transparent to the maximum degree possible. Checks and balances, Bill of Rights, Fourth Estate, 3 branches of government, representative government, and in that day you couldn't have had direct democracy per se. Today we could. Today we could and we should have referenda-based voting for most things. We could have jury-based government. Jury-based government is where you have the privilege of making decisions for your community, your city, your state, your federal government, because you are brought into a process sort of by a lottery selection, but it can be from qualified pools only. This is a way to get money out of politics. But let's just go back to the theme of direct democracy versus representative democracy. When we started this country 200 years ago, we gave it the best start we could. There wasn't a voting franchise for women. There was still slavery. But there was such a high level of illiteracy, you couldn't have had direct democracy, you know, every person with a vote, because most people couldn't read the issues, the background materials, and this sort of thing. You didn't have transportation. There's no, you know, modern transportation. You had only horse conveyance. You had no telephones. You had no telegraphs even in that day. You certainly had no computers and internet. Today we could do so much better than this broken Congress that we have and Senate. They're so bought out by the corporate interests and by what Dwight Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex, this very parasitic Wall Street element that bailed itself out in the 2008 to 2010 period. Partial audit of the Fed reveals that over $20 trillion came out of the public, we the people's funds to all kinds of fat cat groups that were supposed to be the private sector that take it on the chin when they make bad investment decisions, including to Deutsche Bank, which is over there somewhere, UBS Warburg, which is over there somewhere, Barclays, which is also over there somewhere, and all these high-level banking firms that are the problem we have, not the solution, you know, and part of this military-industrial complex that Dwight Eisenhower warned about, because it's big energy, big war and weapons, the military itself, and the media, major elements of the major media, big Wall Street interests. It's a hairball. But all of this kind of thing can be categorized generically as a latter-day Rome phenomenon. When have we ever seen a nation age gracefully, let's say, use its power responsibly? There's, I don't know who this quote is attributed to, but the quote was, the thought is, if you really want to see the character of an individual, give them unlimited power, sort of, and immunity, and see what they do with it. The problem has been that whenever a nation attains great power, great wealth, and the respect that we once had coming out of World War II, FDR, who was a man of integrity, who created the WPA here in the United States, the Works Program Administration, to lift Americans out of poverty, a chicken in every pot, you know, a job for people, jobs creation. This is money coming out of the Treasury instead of Hank Paulson's Wall Street bailout to the international Illuminati sort of dark cabal element. It would be the money coming out of the Treasury to get people to work, to build roads here in the United States, to rebuild our infrastructure, to send single mothers back to college free of charge so they don't have to be on food stamps and this sort of thing. Real help for the people. FDR did this. And then the counterpart program he designed for the international arena was the Marshall Plan, the reconstruction of Europe, which was carried out by Harry Truman because FDR died. It was the birth of the IMF and the World Bank, which initially were constructive institutions, became parasitic sense because they were taken over by this Bank of England, City of London, Committee of 300, Bilderbergers type group. This is a generic, this is not conspiracy theory, this is a generic story about human life on planet Earth. And the tendency on the part of some individuals to really be altruistic and honest and have high integrity and consonance with higher values, and others to whether openly or more commonly with a veneer of goodness around them, pursue very self-centered agendas that oftentimes are very damaging to others and to society. But they will cloak them with patriotic motives, the flag, you know, honorable things. We're doing this to bring democracy over there. And they destroy the nation. They're going to steal whatever resources they can. They're going to loot the U.S. Treasury. They're parasitic with relation to the external environment they're operating in. They're parasitic with relation to the true strength of American fabric and the U.S. Treasury and so forth. This is hypocrisy, and it's certainly not consonant with founding principles of our nation and higher values. What I really wanted to make this video about is this Breakthrough Energy Pioneers group that I decided to get off the ground in San Diego about 6 months ago, 5 or 6 months ago. So you're thinking he's crazy. He started talking about Breakthrough Energy Pioneers. He just went off on this, tirade for the last 15 plus minutes. I have 3 nonprofit projects, and the titles are Reinventing America, New Energy Declaration, and Breakthrough Energy Pioneers. And they were invented in that order. And the one that remains dormant is Reinventing America. And some of my material there is so hard-hitting, and it is so, the vector of that material is so at odds with all of the brainwashing that the American public has allowed itself to be subject to. I have 2 nephews in the military today in their young 20s, and I understand they didn't want to flip burgers at McDonald's, so they're in the military. But I'm in my mid-50s, and since the Vietnam War, my military, the U.S. military, has never done anything honorable. That's going to sound, I realize, too harsh to most people. But Robert McNamara and others admitted that the Vietnam War was all done under false pretenses. The Gulf of Tonkin is domino theory was a load of shit, basically, and so forth. What has changed since then? You think the real premises for Iraq were any different? Do you want to look into do some Googling about 9/11 truth? If you're the unusual American willing to look at that, talk about what's really going on in Afghanistan and with Vladimir Putin and Ukraine. They're trying to get an alternative to the US dollar going. It's the BRICS coalition, BRICS. There's more than 140 nations now on board with a new alternative to the global central banking system and the US dollar. Vladimir Putin is key muscle behind that coalition to bring up a new international banking system and a new international currency standard and so forth. And the Western European nations, who have been close NATO allies and US partners throughout the post-World War II period because of the goodness of the Marshall Plan and the other great things that some of our former leaders like FDR and Harry Truman and JFK had done in terms of demonstrating honorable values. Western Europe is drifting away from the United States because they see this totalitarian Orwellian aspect of U.S. policy and this inability, like President Obama's recent speech to the UN, to come clean about what really the motives and the behaviors are. And so Western Europe is drifting away. They're willing to do business across that Ukraine region and Afghanistan with Russia and energy supplies with a currency outside the U.S. This was Saddam Hussein's big sin. This is why he was really taken out, is that he made it clear to Washington, to George Bush Sr., and to the Washington establishment and their full spectrum dominance policy that they were increasingly enforcing after Gorbachev signed out on the Cold War in Reykjavik during the Reagan era in Iceland. Saddam Hussein made it clear that he was going to start selling oil resources from his country, which are considerable, in non-U.S. currency because he wasn't going to go along with the Washington consensus anymore, even though we initially put him in power. Back to the founding principles of this country, it was supposed to be our government. It's not that we're the little slaves that are subservient to President Obama and the Pentagon and so forth. No, they work for us. So we're the sovereigns. Human beings are the only natural sovereigns. A government has secondary fiduciary sovereignty that we grant them on a conditional. It's always a conditional basis. You follow this Constitution, this Bill of Rights, the Supreme Court follows those principles and so forth, then you're our government. You violate those principles, and then we're back to the Declaration of Independence that says it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish these forms of government and to establish new government, laying its foundation upon sense principles and organizing its powers as in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness, etc. Read the Declaration of Independence. This is the concept of natural law, and this is the concept of human sovereignty, and governments are artificial creations just as corporations are. Americans have become so brainwashed, in my view, and so apathetic and unwilling to have a backbone and to do their reading of history, to look into things critically, to tune out all the stupid crap on television and the video games that are, anyway, and to really research, read, meditate, think, and then say, you know, my ultimate citizen's duty is that where I see something really deviating, I need to put my John Hancock on that petition. I need to call the city editor and say, why aren't you talking about the suppressed revolutionary energy technologies and just all this crap that Sempra SDG&E wants to jam down our throats, and they're going to pretend like putting photovoltaics on the roadways or these huge solar farms in the desert where I am right now, out in the Palm Springs area. Birds fly over and they get flash fried and fall, or they go through the big wind turbines and they get chopped in half. There's all this land that's being taken up, and then it needs these big transmission lines to go back into town, and guess what? It's all still controlled by the big mega energy companies, which are the legacy of these corrupt men we know as J.D. Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan, and it comes through your house in this stupid little thing called a smart meter. How long are people going to put up with this kind of stuff instead of saying, time out? I went to Jim's website, I went to Foster Gamble's website, I went to New Energy Movement website, I went to Breakthrough Energy Movement website, I went to Dr. Greer's website, I read these books, I did these things. I'm picking up the phone and calling you Senator so-and-so, Congressman so-and-so, high official in the Pentagon, whoever you are, high official in the FBI, in the CIA, in my editorial desk in my local newspaper. Here's my name, here's my phone number, here's what I want to know from you. Why aren't you covering these stories on the 6 websites I just mentioned and the 6 books I just mentioned, etc.? It's on my Facebook page. This is what citizenship duty is all about. This is what we're supposed to be doing. Instead, I create my New Energy Declaration petition at newenergydeclaration.net with a hyphen between the words. And all I'm calling for, I'm not calling for, life in prison for George Bush Sr. and David Rockefeller and the others that have locked down these suppressed energy technologies that Mother Earth and humanity needs so much, and they deserve life in prison for sure and more as far as I'm concerned. But just let's get the public to be willing to say, yes, I want a public discussion on this. I don't want more oil wars with my nation's treasury. I don't want the national debt to go from 9 trillion to 18 trillion while it's more Wall Street bailouts and it's more oil wars, and it's going to be control of the geopolitical chess game, and there's going to be a camera on every corner, and the NSA just comes into my computer and deletes things in 10 years when I don't. I want a different world than that. So, each of us has to help move this forward. We can't be cowards and do that. We can't be so concerned about what somebody else will think, because it's not the popular photovoltaic technologies that Al Gore is talking about. He's handsome, he's got Brill cream and all that, and it's okay. It's being funded at a high level by the bad boys, by the big energy firms, by the powers that be, because they do not want the global peasantry to have true liberty, true freedom, the ability for human potential to really blossom. For us to be able to travel around the world freely and visit any of our other 7 billion brothers and sisters, that's not a world they're inviting us into. That's their world. They already have these lockdown energy technologies. They can do fun things with them in their private estates, underground bases, whatever. NASA's using these kind of things all the time. They've been paid for with the taxpayers' dollars, we the people. But the people don't have the courage to say, this needs to be an open discussion. It's not okay with me that 200 plus commercially viable, clean, safe, revolutionary energy and transportation technologies are locked down under Section 181 of the 1951 Invention Secrecy Act of my government, and nobody will talk to me about it, and they're abusing these national security laws. You have a secret government that has grown up within an erstwhile healthy, open, and accountable government of, by, and for the people. And these are two different things. One is oil and the other is water, and they don't mix. You do not allow a secret government to grow inside what is supposed to be an open and democratic government, and everybody just shuts up about it because it's unpopular in terms of media programming and the entertainment world to talk about anything controversial or question high opinion. And when somebody like President Obama comes out and gives this incredible speech to the UN, where I'm just like, Hitler would not have had the chutzpah to tell some of these lies. Stop at every sentence. Write down the sentence and go research it on the internet. You know, just put in the words and find out how different the reality is and so forth. And I think, land of the free, home of the brave. I don't know. Hello. So, back to Breakthrough Energy Pioneers. I do have a tendency to go off on tangents somewhat, but we need it. We need it. We need to get into things that have more value than anything in the mainstream media and popular culture these days. We need to wake up and prevent the current ongoing train wreck from getting really gnarly, because the economic situation in the world, in the United States, in Japan, in China, in Europe, all at the same time is being held together by kite stream and bubblegum right now. It is a huge load of you-know-what. And to the extent that people right now are feeling like, you know, things are still going pretty okay, prices are going up in the supermarkets, but things will hold together, just wait a little while, because the debt levels are unbelievable across all sectors of the international economy right now, and it's going to collapse. It's going to fall apart. We need, coming up from the grassroots level, new sources of hope, new sources of economic development and growth, new sources of being able to energize the public of our country and internationally to say there's a new world that's possible. It doesn't have to be shared scarcity and cameras on every corner and just sort of saluting to authority and being afraid to, you know, to step outside the box of these things that are still providing decent jobs. The breakthrough energy technologies can do this, and they can be a lead-in to Americans saying, so it turns out that our own national security state that Dwight Eisenhower warned us about has kept these technologies from we the people, the natural sovereigns of our country, for 50 plus years. And where big energy, the firms that are the legacy of these nice men, J.D. Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan, have come in and have bought out these technologies from inventors and then locked them away that would allow us to have revolutionary free energy for off-grid power, vehicles that would run on water, vehicles that would have electrical generators that would be fuelless, that would not, that the vehicles would then have unlimited range with electric vehicles. Can you imagine not needing to be plugged in? And the private firms have taken these off the market via black shelving, or they threaten the inventors, they kill the inventors, they threaten them, you know, we know where your children walk to school. We have lots of courtroom grade evidence for this, 50 to 100 cases easily between our network of organizations in this area. And now we know that the NSA is aware of all of our communications, email, phone, and everything else. James Bamford was writing books, credible books, I mean, you know, well-researched books about the NSA and its echelon system for tapping global telephone communications 30 years ago. This is not a secret. So these groups, the high level in the CIA, NSA, which is tied into this national security legislation, 1951 Invention Secrecy Act, Section 181, they also are aware of the private sector interests that come in and take these technologies off the market. And these same groups plan the wars that go over that are actually to control the largest sector of the global economy, which is big energy. Iraq, Afghanistan, Colombia, other cases that could be mentioned. That's a problem, folks. So what we need to do is we need to be a little bit less bashful about saying, as an American, I have a right to know what's going on here. And I'm picking up the phone, I'm calling the director of the FBI right now, and if I get his secretary, I want to call back. No, I'm speaking seriously. We need to reassert morality in our country, ethics, in the most important sectors of human life. There is a potential for a golden age on this planet and shared abundance when people have enough and they have good quality of a good quality of life, and women have education and proper health care. Birth rates drop and people get along. They don't want to go to war. We don't need to live in an Orwellian state. We don't need to live in a world of haves and have-nots. We can live in a world of shared health and happiness and cooperation. The militaries and the war sector should just go away. Legitimate defense in this country from the Vietnam period forward should have been about 15% of what the total expenses actually have been. No more than that. 85% has not just been wasted, it could have gone toward constructive things that would have built a much better world for everyone by now. This breakthrough energy technology area is pivotal. It's pivotal. It's a game changer. It's a fulcrum point. Within our local initial group here in San Diego County, I would like to ask individuals to step forward and volunteer to be meeting coordinators. Go to Sterling Allen's main news reporting website, PESN.com, which stands for Pure Energy Systems Network.com, and he's got a lot of stories. He's got 5,000 plus articles on his website in total, and over the many years. And Sterling, you know, some of the stories that are there and some of the reporting, they're devices that are not for real. They really are not based on solid technology. They're not what they're represented to be necessarily in their YouTube videos or other materials. He goes off on some tracks associated with his religious views and so forth. But his website and others, but his is probably the best I can recommend for a place for trolling, for leads, for technologies that are promising. There's a genre that he calls Qmogen. I refer to it usually as self-running motor generator combinations. He's been big on the LENR Andrea Rossi cold fusion technology. He was recently on the George Norrie show about that within recent weeks. But there's a lot of technologies there that can be researched associated with advanced electrolysis, hydrogen production from water with advanced electrolysis, other things. What I'd like in our local San Diego Breakthrough Energy Pioneers group is for individuals to become subject matter experts in these areas that they find of legitimate breakthrough energy technologies. I'm not talking about photovoltaics and I'm not talking about windmills. We need to consider these energy technologies with a relation to human incomes, poverty situations around the planet, average human quality of life, use of human potential. When a technology such as photovoltaics, wind turbines, is producing power on a per kilowatt, per megawatt basis more expensive than the existing solutions, it is not on our roster. Leave that up to other groups. We need to explore the things that will lift up average human quality of life around the planet and liberate humanity, and then we need to mainstream that discussion. And as that occurs, all this other talk about so many other things that are very limited solutions that are not holistic because they're environmentally clean, but they don't have anything to promise in terms of lifting up human standards of life. We're going into a world of sheer poverty right now with the debt levels the way they are. The markets could fall apart at any point. It's an increasingly world of haves and have-nots. We're going back to a version of Charles Dickens' England. Hello? So, you know, we're going to cover the roadways with photovoltaics technology, and they're going to put it on the taxpayer's tab. And the per kilowatt cost of power is way more expensive than existing fossil fuels, and it's still going through this damn grid power network with these stupid power lines and the stupid smart meters on the side of our home. Hello? How much intelligence do people have? It is a non-starter. We need to turn the discussion in new directions. This Breakthrough Energy Pioneers group, just starting in San Diego, could become the genesis, the seed, for a national, ultimately potentially an international network. On one side, incubation of new breakthrough energy technologies and distribution using both conventional, where possible, and indie methodologies, including open sources, massive open source releasing of plans where it is needed to get around suppression pressures, and we can help pioneer those models for inventors and small companies. On the other hand, the New Energy Declaration type subject matter, which is mainstreaming the discussion of the fact that whenever we get a golden egg that is so promising that the world needs, the snake slithers out from behind the bushes, either from the private energy sector or the national security apparatus of the United States typically, but it's also Europe and other locations have been involved in this, swallows the egg and goes back into the bushes, and we pretend like it didn't happen. And we go back to listening to what Al Gore is proposing about it. This has to stop. We need to take everything up to a higher turn of the spiral. Breakthrough Energy Pioneers can be pivotal in this, and we will work cooperatively with Breakthrough Energy Movement, New Energy Movement, Thrive Movement, Dr. Greer's projects and others, Sterling Allen's work and others. Anybody who can help in this cause, any movement, any organization is needed. Let's do our best to create a better world for everyone. Thank you.